From the outside, David and Lisa Holloway had the kind of marriage people envied. They lived in a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood in Charleston, South Carolina. David, a successful real estate developer, was charming, well-spoken, and always smiling at neighbors as he jogged in the morning. Lisa, a former schoolteacher, had traded her career for full-time motherhood, raising their 2 young children. To the world, they were the perfect couple. But what no one saw, what no one even suspected, was what happened once their front door closed. Lisa had mastered the art of appearances. She knew exactly how to smile at the right moments, how to brush her hair over the fading bruises on her arms, how to excuse the occasional limp by blaming clumsiness. David was good, too good, at making sure his anger left no visible marks. For years, Lisa endured it in silence, convincing herself that she had to stay for the kids, that one day things would change. But things never did. And when David's cruelty turned from her to their children, when she saw their daughter flinch as he raised his voice, something inside her snapped. She knew she had to leave. Lisa started planning her escape in secret. She withdrew small amounts of money, just enough that David wouldn't notice. She reconnected with an old college friend who worked at a women's shelter. She even went as far as buying a used car under a fake name, parking it a few blocks away so that when the time came, she and the kids could disappear. She was so careful. She planned for everything, except for what happened the night before she was supposed to leave. It was supposed to be just another evening. David came home, greeted the kids with a forced warmth, then poured himself a drink. Lisa's heart pounded as she pretended everything was normal, knowing in less than 24 hours she and the kids would be free. But then, David's phone buzzed. Lisa wasn't one to snoop. She had learned long ago that it wasn't worth the risk, but this time, something told her to look. Maybe it was the way David's expression changed, the way his jaw tightened as he glanced at the screen before flipping the phone over. She waited until he went upstairs. Then, hands trembling, she picked up his phone and opened the message. Her breath caught in her throat. It was from a woman she didn't recognize. And the message? Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Hope your wife doesn't suspect a thing. Lisa felt sick. The man who had controlled her life, who had made her feel small, worthless, he was cheating on her. The irony of it all was almost laughable. But then, another realization hit her. David wouldn't be home tomorrow. His affair had just bought her the perfect window to escape. It should have been a relief. But she underestimated one thing, David's instincts. The next morning, Lisa kept everything normal. She made breakfast, packed lunches, kissed David goodbye as he left for work. The moment he was out of sight, she sprang into action. She grabbed the emergency bags she had hidden in the basement, hurried the kids into the car, and took off. She was free. Or so she thought. What she didn't know was that David had felt something was off. Maybe it was the way she didn't meet his eyes that morning, or maybe it was just years of controlling her that made him sensitive to the slightest change. Lisa had only made it 20 miles out of Charleston when her phone rang. David. She ignored it. 5 seconds later, another call. Then another. Then a text. Where are you? Her hands tightened on the wheel. She didn't respond. Then another message. Lisa, if you don't turn around right now, I swear you'll regret it. Her blood ran cold. He knew. Lisa pressed harder on the gas. She knew she couldn't go home. She couldn't risk leading him to the shelter either. She needed a plan, fast. That's when she saw it. A police station. Without hesitation, she pulled into the lot. She turned in her seat, looking at her kids, her terrified, innocent kids. Stay here, baby, she whispered to her daughter. Mommy will be right back. She walked into the station with her hands shaking, her breath shallow. The officer at the front desk looked up. Ma'am, are you okay? And that's when it hit her. For the first time in years, she wasn't okay. And she didn't have to pretend to be. Tears spilled down her face as she whispered, please. I need help. justice is served. Or is it? What happened next felt like a blur. Officers escorted her and the kids inside, took her statement, and within an hour, David was in handcuffs. Lisa watched from the station window as they led him to the squad car. He locked eyes with her, his face unreadable. But there was something there, something dark. That night, Lisa and the kids stayed in a safe house. It was the first time in years she slept without fear. The next morning, she got a call from the police. David had been released on bail. And that wasn't the worst part. The officer hesitated before saying the next words. "Ma'am, he's disappeared. No one knows where he is." Lisa's stomach dropped. Her nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. Lisa's hands trembled as she set the phone down. David is gone. No one knows where he is. The officer's words rang in her ears, making her breath shallow, her pulse quicken. She had done everything right, reported the abuse, secured a safe place, put David behind bars. And yet, just one day later, he was free. Worse than free, he was missing. Which meant he could be anywhere. Which meant he could be watching. Lisa turned toward her children, who were playing quietly in the corner of the safe house's small living room. They had no idea how much danger they were in. No idea that their father, the same man who had tucked them into bed so many nights, was now a threat lurking in the shadows. A chill ran down her spine. The police had assured her they would keep an eye out, that officers were patrolling the neighborhood, that they had flagged David's passport in case he tried to flee the country. But Lisa knew David. He wasn't the type to run. No, David was the type to wait. And that was what terrified her most. A cryptic message. That night, Lisa barely slept. Every sound made her flinch. Every creak in the house had her heart pounding. At 3:12 a.m., her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You really thought I wouldn't find you?" Her blood turned to ice. She shot up in bed, breath coming in ragged gasps. Her first instinct was to wake the police officer stationed outside, but something stopped her. David wouldn't be this reckless. He wouldn't send a text from his own phone. Which meant, someone else was helping him. Someone who knew where she was. The realization made her stomach drop. She wasn't just up against David anymore, she was up against whoever was protecting him. She knew she had to act fast. By morning, Lisa had made a decision. The safe house was compromised. Staying there was suicide. She packed only what she needed, waking the kids gently. "Mommy, where are we going?" her daughter asked sleepily. "Somewhere safer, baby," Lisa whispered. But deep down, she knew, nowhere was truly safe. Lisa drove with white-knuckled hands, constantly checking the rearview mirror. She had no plan, no destination, just a desperate need to get away. She stopped at a gas station 2 hours outside Charleston, her nerves still on edge. As she stepped out of the car, her phone buzzed again. Another message. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. She looked around, heart hammering. Was he here? Watching? Then, something, or someone, caught her eye. A man, standing near the convenience store entrance, watching her. Tall. Broad shoulders. Familiar. Too familiar. Lisa's stomach twisted. It was Greg Sanders. David's best friend. And he was smiling. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. Greg Sanders. David's best friend. His most loyal defender. The man who had sat at their dining table, laughing over drinks while she silently nursed fresh bruises beneath her sleeves. And now, here he was. Watching her. He leaned casually against the gas station wall, arms crossed over his chest, like he had all the time in the world. His smile was slow, deliberate. He knew exactly what he was doing. Lisa forced herself to breathe. Think. The kids were still in the car. If she ran now, Greg would know she had seen him. If she panicked, she'd make herself an easy target. So she did the hardest thing imaginable. She acted normal. Lisa grabbed the gas pump with shaking hands and started filling the tank. Greg made his move. "Lisa." His voice was smooth, practiced. She didn't look up. He took a slow step forward. "You shouldn't be out here all alone. Dangerous, don't you think?" She forced a weak smile. "I'm not alone." Greg's eyes flicked to the car, where the kids sat, oblivious. His smirk widened. "I gotta say, Lisa," he mused, "you've got guts. Running off like that. Making things messy." Lisa's stomach twisted. "I don't know what you're talking about." Greg let out a soft chuckle. "Sure you do. David just wants to talk. Clear the air. You owe him that, don't you?" Lisa's fingers clenched the gas nozzle so tightly her knuckles ached. "Owe him? After everything David had done?" Greg's voice lowered. "You don't want to make things worse for yourself, Lisa. For the kids." A chill ran through her. This wasn't just about David's pride. This was about control. And Greg wasn't here to help her. He was here to bring her back. Lisa's mind raced. She couldn't let Greg follow her. Couldn't let him see where she was going. She forced a laugh, shaky, but believable. "Greg, come on. I just needed space. You know how David gets." Greg tilted his head. "Then why are you hiding?" Lisa sighed dramatically, pretending to let her guard down. "I'm not. I panicked. I should have called him." Greg studied her. He didn't believe her. Lisa took a careful step closer. "If I call him now, will that fix things?" Greg hesitated. That was all she needed. She slammed the gas pump back into place, jumped into the driver's seat, and hit the gas. The tires screeched as she sped out of the station. Greg's voice rang behind her. "Lisa." She didn't look back. Lisa drove for miles, heart pounding so hard she could barely see straight. Finally, she pulled into an empty motel lot, parking the car at an angle so she could keep an eye on the road. She turned in her seat. The kids were wide-eyed, confused. "Mommy, who was that man?" her daughter whispered. Lisa forced a smile. "Just an old friend, baby." A lie. But one she had to tell. Her phone buzzed. A text. "Bad choice, Lisa. You just made this a lot harder." Her breath hitched. Then, another message. A photo. Her house. From just a few hours ago. The front door wide open. A single line of text followed. "See you soon." Lisa's blood ran cold. He wasn't just looking for her. He had already been there. Lisa's entire body went numb. David had been to the house. She stared at the photo on her phone, her mind racing. How? How had he gotten there so quickly? Was he alone? Or had Greg been helping him all along? She glanced at her children in the back seat, innocent, unaware of the storm closing in around them. This had to end. She couldn't keep running. She had to stop David before he stopped her. Lisa pulled out of the motel lot, hands gripping the wheels so tightly her knuckles turned white. She needed help, but not from the police. David had money, influence, connections. He had gotten out on bail within a day. The legal system wasn't enough to keep him away. She needed someone who wasn't afraid of David. Someone who could fight on her terms. Her mind settled on one name. Detective Ryan Calloway. The one man who could stop him. Ryan Calloway had been the lead investigator on a high-profile domestic violence case the year before, one that ended with the abuser mysteriously disappearing. Rumors swirled, but nothing was ever proven. All Lisa knew was that Ryan got results. And right now, she needed results. She called his number. A gruff voice answered. "Calloway. Lisa took a shaky breath. "Detective, my name is Lisa Holloway. I need your help." A pause. Then, "Holloway? As in David Holloway?" "Yes," she whispered. "He found me." A longer pause. Then, "Where are you?" Lisa hesitated. Could she trust him? Then she thought of David. Of Greg. Of the bruises, the fear, the photo on her phone. She gave him her location. "I'll be there in 20, Ryan said. "Stay put." And Lisa? "Yes. This ends tonight." Lisa waited in the car, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Then. Headlights. A black SUV pulled up beside her, and a tall, rugged-looking man stepped out. Ryan Calloway. Lisa rolled down her window. "Detective." A sound cut through the night. Pop pop pop. Gunshots. Lisa screamed as the windshield shattered. Ryan grabbed her, yanking the car door open. "Move!" Lisa scooped up her kids and ran, heart slamming against her ribs. Behind them, a dark figure emerged from the shadows. David. Gun in hand. The moment of truth. Lisa turned, her body shielding her children. David smirked, lowering the gun slightly. "You really think you can take my kids away from me, Lisa?" Ryan stepped in front of her. "Drop the weapon." David chuckled. "And what are you gonna do, detective? Arrest me again? We both know I'll be out by morning." Ryan didn't blink. "Who said anything about arresting you?" A flicker of uncertainty crossed David's face. Lisa watched, breathless, as Ryan took a slow step forward. "You think you're invincible, don't you? That your money, your influence, your connections make you untouchable?" David's smirk returned. "That's because they do." Ryan let out a low chuckle. "Not tonight." Before David could react, Ryan lunged. A single shot rang out. Then, silence. David staggered, a look of shock crossing his face. Then, he collapsed. Lisa gasped, clutching her children as the reality sank in. David was dead. Justice, finally. The next few hours were a blur. Police swarmed the scene. Greg was arrested. Lisa gave her statement, her hands still trembling. Ryan stayed by her side the whole time. Finally, as the sun began to rise, he looked at her. "You're free now." Lisa swallowed the lump in her throat. Free. For the first time in years, she believed it. A new beginning. A week later, Lisa stood on the porch of her new home, far from Charleston, far from the ghosts of her past. Her children played in the yard, their laughter filling the air. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight she had carried for so long finally lift. David Holloway had tried to control her. To break her. But in the end, he had lost. She had won. As she turned to step inside, her phone buzzed. A text. From an unknown number. "It's never really over, Lisa." Her breath caught. She looked around. The street was empty. The laughter of her children rang behind her. But suddenly, the air felt wrong. Lisa's hands shook as she typed a response. "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "See you soon." Lisa's stomach dropped. This wasn't over. It had only just begun.